Okay, going to do our appraisal of the 8 GOP kooks that Fox Comedy Business News found worthy to attend their recent stand-up comedy fest, which they called a debate. So without further ado, we'll go over the 8 imbeciles. First up, we have Carly Fiorina, an inept, shrill, proven liar who rolled out a gigantic lie about Planned Parenthood that she ended up stepping in and getting caught in and then trying to fall back on and claim it was true again and again, and then getting caught further and further in her lie. She seems somewhat smart, but all in the worst ways. She uses lies to manipulate, and she's just not credible. She does have one good attribute. She was willing to go after 4-time bankruptcy filer Donald Trump for his numerous frequent bankruptcies, but she's unelectable. Next up is John Kasich. Not such a bad guy, actually. Seemingly worst attribute is that he's a religious kook, and religious kooks can't be trusted. They're not bright, so they make poor decisions. They're not well informed, so they make poor decisions. They rely on fairy tales and fantasies and things that are untrue, so they make poor decisions. So he's all the way around a poor decision maker, and certainly not qualified to lead a secular nation like the United States of America. He is a bit less obnoxious than the traditional GOP kook, but there is one thing, and this might or might not be the case. He seems to have an obsequious quality about him, which is unusual. Not a good thing, maybe, unless what he's seeking is really something to benefit the welfare of the entire nation, and that might be the case. We don't know. We've never met him, don't know a thing about him other than what's presented for the media. But unelectable nonetheless. Moving on. Okay, next up is little pinhead turd, Rand Paul, product of anti-American religious kook Ron Paul, a racist degenerate. The turd doesn't fall too far from the dog's rectum, and here we have another pot of poo. He's a weak, bald weasel. He seems very wimpy, with as much strength and fortitude as a single ply of toilet paper, only less useful. He seems weak as can be. Not going to spend a lot of time on this guy, as he's a nothing, and of course unelectable. Moving on. Next up is Jeb Bush. Boring, well-funded, decent haircut, well-connected politically and financially, although GOP constituents don't really like him. They want a lunatic. They're a fringe element now, minority of America, rebelling against everything that's American. They're against women's right to equal pay. They're basically anti-freedom. They're against gay rights and gay marriage, which went through. So now they're furious and they want a crazy person. So Jeb Bush doesn't quite fit that role. He's enabled by read my lips, no new taxes, Pappy Bush, a putz in his own right, and he's also the brother of unelected war criminal and buffoon George Bush, the one who buried America in all of the problems we're trying to extricate ourselves from now. He's white. That matters enormously to the Republican racist religious cult, so he has that going for him. He sounds like a moron 96% of the time, which is about 4% better, generally speaking, than most Republicans. So he does a little bit better on that. He can present himself a little better, at least. And don't count him out now, although it seems like he doesn't have the momentum. He has the funding. He has the connections. And in as much as it might seem like some of the other candidates are more appealing to the lunatics right now, as this draws closer and the GOP starts to determine who is and isn't electable, this is likely this loser is going to be the imbecile at the end of the clown car line. he'll be the last clown standing. And he's perfectly unelectable, too. So moving on from this putz. Okay, next we have raging piece of shit religious kook turd Cruz. He's an immigrant from Canada, Canadian-born, and wants to enact legislation that would give he himself sole determination over who was allowed into America. Basically, he would determine on his own, Canadian-born, would determine who is American enough. This guy's a complete piece of shit, complete whack job. He's not slick, he's not smooth. He's twerpy, geeky, weak-looking. He looks like a measly little piece of crap. One of the most detestable and despicable creatures who's ever been in here. He's a complete anti-American. He caused the first credit downgrade in American history by stifling the debt limit raise, which his idol Ronald Reagan, a hero to the Republican religious cult, raised the debt limit 18 times while he was in office. Created most of the debt we're trying to walk our way out of now. He's despicable, this lowlife. Absolutely despicable. Nothing good about turd Cruz. He's an idiot, a hypocrite. He's a disgusting lowlife. He sided with our enemy, basically, Iran, with his Iran letter. He's a very creepy individual. He's a phony pro-lifer, claims to be pro-life while he's for war, the death penalty, and he's also, of course, heavily pro-gun. So he's a retard, disgusting piece of shit, and entirely unelectable at first glimpse. Moving on from this gigantic piece of shit. Next up we have gigantic debtor Marco Rubio. He's slick. He can't manage money. He may look good on camera, in front of a camera, especially when he's chugging down a water because he can't collect his thoughts. But he's a pinhead and a moron, an ass kisser. Brown noser to the GOP. Basically serves the top 0.1% of America, or wherever the check is coming from. Rubio's a putz. He's in debt up to his eyeballs, and frankly, would be a very poor choice as an individual to run the greatest economic power on the planet. As much as it might be normal for many Americans to be in great debt, not an unusual thing, most would probably agree that those people don't have the greatest finesse with finances and money and the economy, spending, etc., budgeting, so they shouldn't be in charge of anything where that's a heavy responsibility. This guy doesn't pass the test. Aside from that, he's a blithering idiot. Being paid for by GOP donors, probably the worst representative for general mainstream America that you could possibly pick. Again, a smooth talker, but he French kisses the assholes of the GOP donors as they're puckering. Unsuitable for anything short of maybe changing a tire for you, or maybe cleaning a window here and there. Totally offensive individual too when you get down to the real depth of him, and entirely unelectable. Now let's move on from this dumbass. Okay, probably our favorite entertainment this election cycle is idiot, birther, racist, huge pile of shit, Donald Trump. Aside from being a 4-time bankruptcy filer who says, "I didn't file bankruptcy, I just used the laws." Right, Trump used the bankruptcy laws 4 times for his failing companies that he couldn't keep afloat because he's such a lousy businessman. He was left a ton of money by his father and squandered it all. This guy's an unelectable buffoon. He has the reverse Midas touch. Whatever this guy touches turns to shit instantly. He's obnoxious. He's a big mouth. He's a complete and utter moron. He talks big and he's full of shit. Completely unelectable. Building his wall and doing all these projects, building the military up 10 times over would bankrupt the country. Just like he's bankrupt all of his businesses, he would bankrupt America. He'd start wars with the entire world. That would cost us even more. Literally, this guy would bankrupt us probably in the first 60 days if he were to sit in the White House. He's an absolute moron. He had all of his clothing from his shitty clothing company manufactured in China And all he does is harp on about China this, China that. And the guy's taken advantage of their cheap labor for years. This guy gets in the White House. He'd probably outsource our weapons manufacturing to China. This bloviating piece of shit is nothing more than a toupee with a piece of shit underneath it. Absolute moron. Trump wants to bomb where the oil is in different countries. He's going to bomb the oil out from under ISIS. Yeah, well, what would that do? Raise the price of oil to about $1,000 a barrel? Bush raised it to $150. Another GOP asshole. He's bombing in Iraq, raising it to a 150-year high. What would Trump do to the price of oil? These guys don't know what they're doing. Trump's a moron. Talks big, hasn't a clue what he's talking about. Trump says he's going to close mosques, too. He's going to violate the U.S. Constitution's freedom of religion. As much as we despise religion, people have a right to read whatever fairy tale they want. And if they want to believe Dr. Seuss and the Cat in the Hat are real, go ahead. Believe that. Absolutely. It just makes you a fool. And people will laugh at you. And as long as you're not acting on that, then we don't care. No one does. But Trump, this guy's such an idiot. He's going to close mosques to appease the biggest anti-American trash in our country. Goes against everything that's America. So Trump and his big talk trying to appease these pieces of shit with his closing mosques. What a cocksucker. You couldn't do anything less American. Trump also wants to have ID cards for Muslims, and he doesn't object to a database full of Muslims, keeping track of them like there's some kind of a criminal and need to be tracked. What we need to do is track people who file bankruptcy 4 times so we don't ever loan them money again. There's nothing lower than Trump in this election. This is the biggest piece of shit in the election. Absolutely nothing lower. You can't get underneath this pile of dog shit. It is the gutter. There's nothing less American than Donald Trump. All right, moving on to the last piece of shit. Let's get rid of this pile of shit here. Okay, and our last crap testant is moron Ben Carson. An imbecile, thinks the earth is 4,000 years old, thinks the pyramids were used to house grain. They don't get any dumber than this moron. He encourages citizens to charge assault rifle wielding gunmen. If this imbecile had been dictating the policy in France would have suffered 10 times the casualties. Instead of having people lie down on the ground carefully and trying not to be shot by playing dead, had they charged these assault weapon wielding maniacal religious kooks, they'd have been shot to ribbons. So you get an idea of what kind of an imbecile Carson is, especially from his thinking the pyramids are used to hold grain just because he read it in some religious dogma. This guy's a buffoon. He's a 7-day Adventist, absolute moron. His whole life is taking advantage of liberal policies to benefit himself as a black man in America, which is fine. We applaud that. However, he wants to get rid of all the policies that enabled him. He doesn't like this liberal policy and that liberal policy. Those are all the policies that enabled him to actually be up here making a fool of himself in front of the entire world. He took free money from this, he took free money from that, and then he says it's from faith in Jesus. Jesus and faith are not responsible for that. Those are all psychotic delusions that Ben Carson suffers from. Again, not a bright guy, and he's mentally ill. This guy thinks China is fighting in Syria. He's got an enormous amount of malpractice cases against him. Never seen that many. This guy, who knows what he was doing inside a human body. Shouldn't have been there in the first place. This guy's about as qualified to be a doctor as Rush Limbaugh, the Vicodin addict. This guy is a toxic religious kook. He is completely insane. He's one of these crazy sickos that made comments comparing immigrants to rabid dogs. Alright, let's get rid of this psychotic piece of shit. We already know what's going to happen. Guess what's going to happen? Can you guess? Well, we'll show you anyway.